1. Years ago, I worked for a large manufacturing company in my hometown. If you have food, cleaning products, or paper products in your home, it was probably made by this company. I was also pregnant. Most of the people I worked with were awesome. There were a couple of ladies who really took me in because this was my first child. And I was 20 and hopelessly overwhelmed, but on the other hand, there were these 6 ladies who had it out for me. Not sure why. Don't know if it was jealousy or the fact that their uteruses had dried up years ago and spewed dust. Regardless of the reason, these queen bees hated that I got to have a cushy job just because I was pregnant. I didn't have a cushy job because I was pregnant, I got it because I excelled at the job, and so the higher-ups gave me some extra responsibilities during reports, which took me off the line and into a chair a few hours a day. A little background. There are 3 buildings on the top of a hill. Each building is side by side, but their parking lots descend down a hill. Each building had its own designated parking areas. The parking lot for A building was right on ground level, and most of the execs worked there. Lot B was a little lower down the hill, and is where a lot of chemists and labs doing research were housed. I had worked in B building several times before on other projects. Building C was where most of the manufacturing happened, and so needed more space than other buildings. This is also why it was all the way down at the bottom of the hill, and you had to walk up almost 200 stair steps to get to the building. I counted them once, and I think it was about 196 or 198 steps. This parking lot was affectionately called the Pit because it was so steep. When I was about 7 months pregnant, I found the pit was becoming exceedingly difficult to manage while carrying the extra baby weight, so I asked my supervisor if I could start parking in Building B's lot. He had no problem with it, so I started parking there. Another month later, the sweet ladies that I'd worked with threw me a baby shower on our lunch break. They hooked me up with everything that I could possibly need. Since I was working full-time and going to school, I couldn't afford a lot of these things. I mean, they bought me big-ticket items like a crib, playpen, changing table, etc. I was in awe. Yes, I had a crib at 8 months, but it was used and old and probably under recall. They couldn't trust it, so they bought me a new one. The supervisor bought me a bunch of diapers from the company's store where he got a huge discount. See, told you they make everything. At the end of the day, everyone helped carry the items to my car, a station wagon. That is when the 6 queen bees saw that I was parking in B lot instead of down in the pit like everyone else. They started yelling at me about how I thought I was better than everyone else parking where I chose. That I better watch out because they were going to see to it and I got in trouble for breaking the rules, and maybe even fired if they had their way. The other ladies told them to back off and shut up. God, how I loved those ladies. They really did take care of me and taught me so much. I found the next day that the queen bees did indeed take their case to the security office. Security called me in. I explained the supervisor who told me I could park in Lot B. Security explained that he, the supervisor, did not have the authority to do so. There were channels for exceptions, and he didn't follow them. That I would have to start parking down the pit like everyone else. I was in tears when I returned to the floor. Queen bees were gloating. The other ladies asked what was wrong. I told them. They were much smarter than my 20-year-old self. They told my supervisor what had happened. He marched right down to the security office. Evidently, he simply had to apply for a medical exception on my behalf. By the end of the day, not only did I have a special placard for my car, but turns out I got to park in Building A's parking lot at the top of the hill, right next to our building, because for medical exemptions, this is the one with handicap accessibility ramps. The next day, I made sure the queen bees saw me in my new parking space. By that, I mean I waited for them to arrive, and when I saw each of them walking into the building, I laid on the horn and waved at each and every one of them with a huge grin. Fuck those harpies. 2. High school was weird for me. On the one hand, I was part of the all-sports teams, except hockey, and hung with the popular folks. On the other hand, I was fat and was a comedic relief for almost everything. Mr. Punchline. Either the one delivering the roast or getting roasted. My weight usually was the main point, quick enough to always say something funny back or roast someone, but was always conscious that I wasn't in the group because I was the cool guy, which tempered my responses from being too rough. Still, I had thought that I had built some friendships. My mistake. One day after football practice, a few of my teammates, and at the time my best friend, Jake, were talking about some rumors that were circulating around from a party that they went to that weekend. Never mind that I wasn't invited, but let's just say 2 people in relationships were caught in a room doing relationship things by the people they were in relationships with. Juicy story, but throughout the space of the conversation, relationships in general came up, and had explained that I was still a virgin, and had yet to even have a high school girlfriend. Cue them, stating they needed to set me up, and that they were not going to let my life be loveless. I didn't really think much about the conversation because I was basically an afterthought. So when one of the girls in the popular group, Sarah, started to talk to me, I didn't put 2 and 2 together. Sarah started to hang with me at lunch, even separating from the larger group to do as such. We bonded over our love of Gossip Girl, which became important later, and our disdain for horror films. This went on for a few weeks, so when she invited me to her house after school, I thought all the obvious thoughts. The walk was cool, but Sarah was a lot more quiet than normal. I remember me thinking she was just nervous. When we got to her house, she asked me to wait at the entrance to her basement while she made sure her house was clear. I complied and sat at the stone stairs, and sat, and sat. I think I waited for 1 hour in ignorance before I realized anything was wrong. This was 10 years ago, so that 1 hour was a true 1 hour. My little BlackBerry phone was drier than dry, and my parents were not about to pay for anything but talk and text. I tried calling her, but got no response. Even still, I waited maybe 20 minutes more before I left. I remember thinking maybe her parents just grounded her or something happened. But the next day at school, I would be able to ask her. Well, the next day happened, and I was getting more looks than I normally would. Snickers here and there made me more self-conscious than anything, again, assuming it was about my weight. It wasn't until lunch that another friend, Rashad, pulled me to the side and showed me a Facebook group I never knew existed. In it were multiple videos of me sitting on the stairs over the course of that 1 hour and 20 minutes. Putting on lip balm, picking my nose, and doing a pit check. Snickers and jokes could be heard as Jake, my friend and teammate, was making fun of my every move, and how could I think that Sarah would be interested in me? Rashad said it wasn't funny and showed me the comments, but I was basically dead inside at that point. I didn't even go to confront Jake and Sarah. I just bumped into them at my locker where Jake said it was a harmless prank, and that they expected me to leave much sooner than they did. By the end of the day, I was the butt of every joke, and other than Rashad, nobody came to my defense. I was lucky enough to make it home before I started bawling my eyes out with how much it hurt. Eventually, the sadness became bitterness and anger. I needed to get back not just Jake and Sarah, but everyone who continuously used me as the joke. I just didn't know how to do it. Funnily enough, I had rented the whole 6 seasons of Gossip Girl from the library, and in the middle of watching it, I came up with a plan. I took a pen and paper and wrote down every single piece of gossip I knew, and I knew plenty. Being a fly on the wall in popular groups, you would be amazed how loud secrets could be told, and how many didn't know who was listening. 2 weeks later, the Shit Talker Twitter post went live, with Jake being the center focus. He was getting tested for an STD not many people knew about, and that he definitely didn't want to be public knowledge. The football star had been around, and when that went live, chaos ensued. It only took his absence and a few girls' conversations, and now it was confirmed. He came back a few days later, and then he was getting those same looks I had gotten, with him being the butt of the joke. I loved every second of it. He went on a warpath trying to find out who the Twitter page belonged to. But because only a few knew about it, he never assumed me. A few days later, and a few more posts, and the shit talker was the talk of the school. Pregnancy, infidelity, you name it. If it was gossip and would get a reaction, it was up. Don't know if everything ended up being true, but a good majority of the people in the know could confirm themselves. It had even leaked into other schools and whole cities apart, where copycats for other schools popped up. Nobody trusted nobody for a while, and instead of jokes made about me, the focus was the group and the dirt people were doing or a part of. Eventually, the gossip ran out, and it became a roasting page before it was taken down for bullying. But for maybe about a month, that page was the only thing high schoolers in my area wanted to talk about. All because a fat kid was joked on. 3. This story is somewhat fresh and I'm still smirking when I remember it, so I decided to share. Some background. I'm a 27-year-old female and work in IT. I'm a well-respected and known member of the IT party circle where I live, so to speak. I am not jaw-dropping, but people know me, and I have a very good reputation. One of the things is I got to the point in my career where I wanted to give back, so I started mentoring others. Mostly, I mentored adults or those who were closer to me in age. Career advice, how to apply for different exchange programs that can boost their professional growth and improve their speaking and writing skills, the usual. But I always was up for the challenge and decided to try and mentor kids. It's not a secret that IT and STEM are increasingly popular right now, and more people want to get into the field. Therefore, there are a myriad of bootcamps, hackathons, and mentoring programs for all ages. So I signed up for one such program as a mentor. Teach kids how to code with blocks, tell them what AI is, and how to develop an MVP. It sounds more complicated than it might look at first glance, especially when you're an educated professional with a degree explaining concepts that are rather complicated to children who may have less than 1 out of 50 of your tech knowledge. I must add that participation in said program gives kids credits and can help them to get into better schools or even be eligible for some university scholarships later in life. So only pros if you ask me. The only thing is that they must upload their MVP project to the site before the deadline. I was assigned 2 teams, primary, early, middle schoolers, Team A, and high schoolers, Team B. Both had 5 members, and the youngest in Team A was 8. I thought, oh my god, this will be tough, thinking about Team A and how I am up for a tough time. Also, since they're so young, the parents of the kids must observe Team A's meetings and my lessons, and parents equals problems. Ironically, despite my worries, even with help from the parents, the kids in Team A were doing great. But the same can't be said about Team B. A little side note. With my mentees, I have 2 rules. 1, at least 1 meeting per week. At least 50% of the group must be present. 2, communication. When I type something like tasks to do or reply to a question asked before, I ask my mentees to respond. Not even text, a thumbs up emoji will suffice. We all know that red status doesn't mean much when you can accidentally open an app for a second and swipe it to clear RAM on the phone. So Team A attended all the meetings and responded to my assignments. There was a curriculum provided by a program to follow, and they were receptive overall. When Team B started okay, but then started not showing on meetings and leaving assignments read but unresponded. I understand they have a lot on their plate, exams are no joke, but they disregarded my time, which I will not be okay with. I have a job to do, and mentoring in that program was 100% volunteering, and there was no payment for the mentors. There was, however, a very strict deadline, the middle of April, when their MVPs must be loaded onto the website for later judgment. I even went pissed. I'm a professional first and an angry lady second. So I wrote multiple messages asking for updates on the project, with warnings at the end that deadline is April 15th, don't miss it. After one such message, the so-called leader of Team B, Sam, wrote me this.
Hi, P. I know that you probably mean well, but you only bother the team with those deadline messages. Can't you, chill out? When we need you, we will contact you and all. Just get off our hair and let us do our job. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings. It is what it is.
Heart emoji. After I read that message, I was like, what the fuck? But I did respond that I would stop messaging if that caused tension within the team. Though the deadline is still on the 15th, and the site would reject any application that was uploaded after.
Just stop, okay? Jeez,
said Sam to that, so I decided, okay, I'm washing my hands out of this. Cue malicious compliance. Since that message, I haven't written anything to Team B. I had scheduled no meetings, updates, or checkups about the curriculum and their understanding, and definitely not a written reminder of the deadline once. Deadline came. Team A uploaded their project with no issues, and their parents even bought me a nice box of chocolate as a thank you gesture. Just like the deadline came and went, Team B started bombarding chat, asking me to help because
something is wrong with this site. We can't upload our project.
I entered the chat and said, yes, it will not upload. No, it's not an issue with the site. The deadline has passed. So if you try to upload, it will only show you an error message. I warned you, kids. No extra credits, no nothing. The rules of that program are simple, but they are hard, no exceptions ones. Team B tried to blame me, saying that as a mentor it was my job to ensure they would succeed. I reminded them that my job as a mentor is to provide support and guidance, keep track of their progress, and remind them of the deadline, which, all of the above, they, via Sam, asked me not to. And since I respected their boundaries, I did exactly what they had requested. They can sulk as much as they want. I have all our communication in writing, so they don't have a leg to stand on when trying to accuse me of sabotaging them in the program. Tough luck, kids. 4. So to set this up, I work at a gas station in a small Midwest town. We have homemade soup and chili made fresh Monday through Friday. My bosses are the most amazing, kind souls I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. This place is great to work at, and most of the customers are gems. There are just enough employees to run all our shifts, and we're all close and get along. This is the one couple who pushed me, an extremely polite, helpful person, to my breaking point. This couple drives a small bus everywhere they go and try to be treated like royalty. They regularly come in and talk poorly to the above-mentioned amazing owners. That didn't sit well with me, but didn't affect the customer service I pride myself on providing. Well, after time I was informed how they were rude to my colleague. That also rubbed me wrong. My coworker had just put food out on the warmer and they walked in. They asked him to make the exact items that were just placed in the warmer again. My coworker is nice but not willing to be wasteful. If something doesn't sell, we have to toss it. Since they were fresh, she refused to make them again. The couple went to the other coworker, who is a people-pleaser, who, to avoid conflict, just made the items. I wasn't impressed how she didn't support the other coworker when these people aren't entitled to preferred treatment. To explain, they've been kicked out of all other local places to eat except the one restaurant in town. They just don't go there as they don't want to pay their prices. Also, my gas station is not a cafe. We put food out in the warmer, as in it's there if someone wants it kind of thing. In the afternoon, there is usually one employee working, so cooking things isn't a major priority when you have to approve gas pumps, handle customers, and complete other duties. We got pizza orders, but you can tell them it will take however long to account for prep time. So they want cheap food, restaurant treatment. They steal refills of soup, which are not discounted, as we lose money if people don't pay for every cup there, as we use real meat and good ingredients. They steal drink refills and help themselves to anything they consider they can or want to. We estimate they steal almost $600 worth of merchandise a year. All that aside, I've tried to be polite and treat them well. They pushed my last button when they noticed me talking to one of my locals who has a little special needs, and came in the next day asking who they were. After I figured out who they meant, they said they were debating amongst themselves whether they were a man or a woman. The blatant rudeness took me back a bit. I told them firmly that it wasn't any of their business and ended the conversation there. Fast forward over the next few weeks, they would call to see what our soup was. If I answered, I'd say we were out. They asked if I could make them something special. I'd say I had other stuff in the oven or a pizza order and not make them anything. Well, one day instead of calling, as I walked away from my counter, I heard the bus pull up. I instantly thought that the soup was still out. I ran over and grabbed the hot pot and hightailed it to the back. They came in and said the soup was gone, and since there was nothing in the warmer, maybe I could make them something. I told them I was just going to put a pizza in. I was not doing a pizza at all. They left, and I immediately texted my manager and explained what I did. She knew how horrible these people are and found it hilarious. Fast forward again a few more weeks. It's my day off, but I'm getting gas and using the ATM. Their bus pulls up between the pups and my front door, which is not a parking spot. She walks in and I say it's not a parking spot. She said she knows and walks over to the food area. The person working is new and didn't pull the soup yet. It was over an hour after it should have been pulled. She walks out to repark her bus. I calmly go grab the soup and take it to the back and pour myself a big old cup of it. As I go back up front and am getting a fountain drink, her and her husband come in and notice the soup is gone. She asks about it and I say it had to be pulled for how long it had been out. She then says, "You guys must really not want us here." It being my day off and being done with them in general, say very clearly and not under my breath at all, "Not really." She flies off the wall and rounds the corner, yelling, "How do you like your sippers?" A little dumbfounded what my sippers did in this issue, I firmly tell her to get out of my store. She screams, "How do you like your effing slippers?" at me again. I raise my voice, which never happens, and say she can leave my effing store or I'll call dispatch. She leaves loudly complaining. I immediately text my same manager explaining the situation and my response, and said I'd accept my punishment. She laughed and considers it the greatest thing ever. I'm now the store's hero, apparently. 5. I'm a 37-year-old male and my husband is a 30-year-old male. We relocated to upstate New York for his military assignment 2 years ago. At the time, he was an Army E4 specialist. Over the course of the next few months, we got settled in, but I hadn't made any meaningful personal connections in the area. Army wives are very cliquey, and in rural New York, the locals are not very accepting of two queer POC men, like my husband and I. In late November that year, the new E5 sergeant transferred into my husband's unit, and they hit it off as buds. She invited us over to her place to hang out with her and her wife. Let's call her Sergeant Wambach, 34 female, and her wife Glennon, 29 female. Wambach does have a small child with her ex, who she does not see, due to the separation and custody agreement. From what she told us, she does pay child support and video call occasionally. That bit of info will come into play much later in the story. An additional 2 side notes for civilian readers. First, there are 2 ranks at the E4 level, Specialist and Corporal. Corporal is a lateral promotion from Specialist. Second, soldiers who are E4 corporals or above are non-commissioned officers. Non-commissioned officers have strict codes of conduct they must follow. That code covers things like acceptable behavior between higher and lower ranks, general acceptable behavior, and prescribed punishments if the code is broken. Non-commissioned officers also have lower enlisted soldiers whom they must supervise and generally keep out of trouble, like a mentor role. Keep that in mind for the rest of the read. My husband is eager for us to hit it off with Wambach and Glennon, as having queer friends to socialize with will allow us to be openly ourselves around them, and expand my social circle at the same time. The weekend comes and we're having a wonderful time. My husband sees this and pushes us to be regular friends. Wambach and Glennon are lovely at this time, so my hubby and I begin to spend a lot of time together with them from then on. The issue. Flash forward 6 weeks to January, and Wambach texts my husband and confides in him that the army has royally screwed her pay-up. She hasn't been paid since arriving in New York because of clerical errors. The base said she didn't file her transfer properly, so the new base can't pay her until the matter is cleared up. And the old unit's leadership is poking their ass and not helping her resolve the matter. And she's hurting for money, badly. She is behind on rent, car, and insurance payments, and using what little her and Glennon have saved to pay for essentials like food, hygiene products, and gas. Wambach shows my husband screenshots of emails between her and the leasing office of her off-base housing that are demanding immediate payment or she will face eviction. Wambach asks my husband for financial help. My husband asks me for my input, as we do tend to follow the 2 yes and 1 no rule for most of our major decisions together. We talked it over and decided to offer her a one-time loan of $500 USD, which we paid through Cash App, on the condition that she repay us when the clerical issue has been resolved. She gladly accepted the terms of our deal and our money. My husband and I both had a soft spot for Wambach and Glennon at the time, because of the friendship we had begun to forge with them, and we also had been in the same situation before with the army while stationed in South Korea. But we lived frugally and put most of our money into savings, so we made it out of that situation quickly with most of our savings intact. My husband also has a very generous and giving nature. I used to as well, but I've been burned in the past by friends and family, so I've cut way back on how much I help people anymore. 3 days later, Wambach again asked my husband for another loan, this time in person, for another $500. She makes the same promises of repaying us when her pay issues are resolved. My husband wants to continue helping her, but tells her that he'll talk it over with me before releasing the money to her. I asked him to wait until he gets home from duty. Once home, I asked him to confirm through text messages that she intends to repay us this second loan before we agree to give her more money. Like I mentioned, I've been burned before, so I've developed a system to cover our behinds just in case. She agrees to repay us, so we send her the additional $500. And I then ask my hubby to screenshot the portions of their text conversations that pertain to loans and the Cash App transaction receipts and to email them to me. I know that sometimes the situation gets worse before it gets better, so I don't think too much of her asking for additional help, but I'm going to take precautions either way. We continue to spend time with Wambach and Glennon over the next few weeks. By mid-February, Wambach lets us know via text that the pay error has been resolved but asks us to be patient a little longer, so that she and Glennon can dig themselves out of the financial hole they were in. My husband and I aren't monsters, so we tell them to pay us when they have their heads above water. And I ask my husband to screenshot and send me that text exchange for what will eventually turn into my revenge dossier on Wambach. Over the course of several months, Wambach and Glennon asks either my husband or myself to provide them with smaller loans for things like gas, or supply them with their favorite beers and hard seltzers for cookouts at their place. Even though we were already bringing our fair share of main courses or side dishes to share, when we first started helping Wambach and Glennon, we assumed their financial situation was all out of their control, a result of the clerical error made by the army. But as we spent more time with them, we learned that wasn't entirely true. They were both terrible at managing their own money and were depending on our continued help to subsidize their lifestyle. The army's error only exacerbated the matter. Simply put, they were living far beyond their means. Everyone should be able to treat themselves to the occasional nice meal or new clothing item, video game, or whatever they enjoy. But when you were borrowing the sums of money they asked of us, you better realize you have got to cut the fat and start with your luxuries and make do with just the necessities. During this time, they also made several excuses as to why they couldn't repay us in part or in full. Excuses like, "Our many pets have fleas and need treatment," We're saving up for a trip. We budget $80 a month each to play Pokemon Go. The latter two I find personally very insulting because if I was in the same boat as them, I wouldn't be allocating money for luxury expenses. Because, in my mind, if I have taking a vacation money, in actuality I have paying you back money. Either way, with each transaction and request, we screenshot and save the evidence. When their debt to us grew to about $1,500, I decided to have a frank discussion with my husband and let him know that I will not support the decision to financially help Womback or Glennon any longer, from our joint account. And upon their return from their trip to see family, we will be confronting them and demanding they repay us in full. Or at least, create a repayment plan with installments. I admit I am the one who put my foot down on the matter first, but to my surprise, hubby was on board and feeling the same way. He did have some reservations about how to go about the matter because Womback is now, at this point, my husband's immediate NCO, which further compounds the issue for us, and the future consequences for her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So to avoid any potential retaliation on her part, my husband and I decided I would be the one to confront them in our group chat. About a week after they returned from their trip, which was in mid-September, I messaged them in our group chat, which consisted of just the four of us. I sent the following message. Now that you're back from the trip to see Womback's family, we wanted to talk to both of you about repaying the various loans we've given you. They total about $1,500, according to our Cash App receipts. We wanted to wait until you return from the trip because we know how important seeing Womback's family was to both of you. We PCS, permanent change of station, relocating for a new assignment, in a little over 6 months from now and would like you to square away your debt before then, so we can use those funds to help us move. Womback was the first to reply saying, "You'll get my tax return. When we got back, Glennon's hours were cut and we're paycheck to paycheck again. Giving you my tax return is the only way we can pay you back." Glennon eventually replied with just a question mark, which leads me to believe she didn't know the full extent of how much we had loaned them before I brought it up that day. But to be honest, that is just speculation on my part. Either way, the hubby and I agree to wait until tax season to be repaid. But from this day on, Womback was noticeably more distant and colder to me in all our face-to-face interactions. Not rude or mean, but less friendly. Around this time, Womback let us know that she began proceedings with her ex to terminate her parental rights to her son, which would stop her financial responsibilities as well. That would have theoretically freed up more funds for Womback and Glennon to budget or blow on frivolous things. But the process has been drawn out, and to the best of my knowledge, I believe they're still figuring it out. Now, any normal person would assume that if someone you borrowed money from is asking you to repay them, you wouldn't ask them for more money, but not Womback. She periodically continued to ask my husband for more loans, directly and indirectly. Directly by texting him individually instead of in the group chat to ask for more money, or indirectly by giving him a sob story about having to go without beers and chewing tobacco so she can afford to feed her 4 dogs, 4 cats, and 2 fish that she had crammed into her little 2-bedroom apartment. Every request that she made from that point on, however, was still refused, and I told my husband to make me the bad guy so she would be less likely to retaliate against him at work and make his remaining time at the base more difficult. The constant refusal contributed to Womback's noticeably less favorable treatment of me, and between the time I confronted her and Glennon in the group chat to the following January, she would make periodic attacks on my character to my husband. I assume hoping to drive us apart or divorce so she could have more access to his portion of our savings without me stopping her. This is the most noteworthy example, but not the only one. After her own promotion ceremony in October from E5 to E6, Womback tried to convince my husband I was a narcissist, manipulative, and financially abusing him by not allowing him to give her more money. That's right. She tried to argue that I, who equally contributes to our joint savings and checking accounts, was financially abusing him by refusing to allow him to give her more of our money. I wish I was a witness to the mental gymnastics she had to perform to come to that conclusion, because it would have been a spectacular and entertaining show, I'm sure. Our plan was working. She didn't blame my husband for the lack of help anymore. Wambach blamed me, as we wanted. But why jump to that conclusion instead of the more sensible and logical, "Oh, they've grown tired of my shit and my mooching ways. I should just stop." If anyone has insight into the mind of a narcissist, please let me know in the comments. Wambach would always make these attacks on me at the facility they worked in, or through texts, and my husband would bite his tongue and just nod along to whatever she said. But at the end of his workday, he'd recount everything that was said and apologize to me for not defending me. I was almost always able to brush it off and not let it affect me, as I had been able to reconnect with a good friend from high school who's also a military spouse, whose husband was recently stationed there as well. Kat, and her husband, Sergeant First Class Foster. Kat and Foster introduced my hubby and I to their good friends and another Army couple in the area, Regina and Sergeant First Class Hanks. While grabbing coffee with Kat and Regina, I let them know in full detail about the situation my hubby and I were in with Glennon and Wambach. And because they're amazing friends, they offered to talk to their husbands about it and see if they have any advice for us. Boy, did they ever. Foster and Hanks both advised us to do the same thing, take our revenge dossier to the chain of command at my husband's unit and get our money back immediately, because not only were Wambach's actions shady, but also a gross breach of the code of conduct NCOs are supposed to follow. After talking it over with my husband, we decided we should wait until tax season to move forward with any potential action, as we did agree to wait to be paid back with Wambach's income tax return. The holidays passed without major incidents, and we're now in mid-January again. Wambach scheduled a shoulder surgery for herself and prepared to go on medical leave at the end of the month. A week or so before she went on leave, she sent my husband another private message. It read, "Once the child support is canceled and no longer being taken out of my check, I'll send you $200 a month until I pay off what you lent me. I was going to use my tax return, but I want to pay off a bill with it to have fewer payments. I haven't forgotten to pay you, I just needed this child support to go away and for Glennon's checks to be good again." My husband showed me the text, and we crafted a reply together. We said, "I will talk it over with my husband and get back to you. Good night, see you later." It being late at night, my husband went to sleep, and I began writing a stern but fair message to Wambach and Glennon, explaining how we felt betrayed and hurt by their constant shady actions, reviewed every bullshit excuse they used on us, and that our patience had run out a long time ago, that we were giving them one final chance to pay us back, in full with their tax return, or my hubby and I would bring the matter to their chain of command, and even small claims court if we needed to. I delayed sending it to Wambach and Glennon until my hubby was awake and able to share his input on the message, but there was a last-minute change in his work schedule and he wouldn't be able to read it until late the following evening. That day, while he was at work, Wambach and Glennon went into the facility to use their printer for some paperwork they needed to finalize her medical leave. According to my hubby, Wambach partially burst into the room, and before saying hello or exchanging pleasantries of any kind, tells him quite adamantly, "If your husband doesn't like the changes to the deal, you can tell him he can kiss my ass." He manages to keep his cool in that moment, replying with a simple no, but is quite pissed while he's recounting what happened to me as we ate dinner. Over the course of the past year, it became clear to us that Wambach was biding her time until we moved to cut contact with us and never repay us. This was our final straw. Husband and I decided we were not giving them a final warning. We were just going to tap into our petty sides and just bring the matter to the chain of command, and whatever happens to her is the karma she deserves. We followed the proper procedure and arranged a meeting with the company commander a few days after she burst into the office. We come prepared with printouts from the dossier, screenshots, and transaction receipts. The commander was very disappointed in Wambach and assured us that he would get the ball rolling on this. A few days later, the commander reaches out to my husband and arranges for him to make a sworn statement in front of another member of the chain of command. The commander also asks me to prepare a statement to go into the report. While we were in the middle of all this, Womback has gone on medical leave and isn't aware of the shitstorm coming her way. Like any other workplace, our frequent meetings with higher-ups got the attention of many and became the hot gossip of the unit. Luckily for us, it never got back to Womback, and the exact details of why we were meeting so frequently with the chain weren't revealed either. Part of the reporting process was to share with Command if we thought Womback had taken advantage of any other lower enlisted soldiers, which caused my husband to drop a bomb on me and the Command. Some of his co-workers had sworn him to secrecy, but they revealed to him that they were in the exact same situation as we were. To keep their anonymity, my husband only suggested that Command speak to every lower enlisted soldier at the facility they worked in daily, and if they felt inclined to confide in them, then they could get their money back too. The commander thanked us for bringing the matter to his attention, assured us that he and the rest of the command chain were taking this very seriously, including the brigade commander, company commander's boss, who personally took the time to meet with us and assured us we would get all our money back before we moved away to hubby's next military assignment. Two little wrenches were thrown in our plan, however. First, the commander let us know that while Womback was on leave, she was untouchable. Command couldn't call her in for disciplinary action until she had been medically cleared to return to duty. Second, Womback's medical leave was extended when her shoulder wasn't healing as quickly as predicted. It was extended until early March, which got it very close for us, as we were scheduled to move away mid-March. Now, this next little bit wasn't planned, but is my petty cherry on top of my revenge. After Womback's last dig at me in the office, I cut contact with her in Glennon, replying only when absolutely necessary in our group chat and only occasionally to keep up appearances so not to rouse suspicion of our bigger plan. During the final days of Womback's medical leave, my awesome, supportive husband was also promoted to E5 and would be receiving his own ceremony. A huge part of those ceremonies is choosing a family member or a fellow soldier to do the honors and pin you with your new rank. Womback had been eagerly waiting for my husband's promotion for months. My guess is that she was love-bombing him and trying to ingratiate herself more onto him in an attempt to make a rift between him and I. And in her head, she was the only clear choice to pin him. Despite that, it's the promoted person's choice. My husband invited his friends and co-workers and asked me to pin him at the ceremony. I was very happy to, and when he asked me if we should invite Womback and Glennon to keep up appearances, I told him, "This is your ceremony. In recognition of your hard work and efforts, you invite whoever you want. I can put up with Womback for however long the ceremony is. Don't worry about me on your day." Being the awesome husband he is, he chose not to invite Womback or Glennon, and asked the chain of command not to discuss arrangements for the ceremony with Womback, as to keep her in the dark and from attending. The ceremony was a wonderful time for us, and happened a few days before Womback was to return to work. Almost immediately, when she reported back to work, she learned of the ceremony and was irate from what we heard through the grapevine. By this time, my husband had already started clearing the process to move, so while we were still stationed in New York, he wasn't on regular duty, and so not in the facility any longer. Womback sent my husband so many angry texts, which I asked him to ignore and let me reply to her. Paraphrasing, I said something like, "Hey, chill. When you busted into the office in January and said what you said about me, I chose to limit my contact with you in Glennon. I told my husband he doesn't need to do the same for my sake. So when he was promoted, he asked me if he could invite you, and I told him not to worry about me, that I could put up with your company for however long that ceremony was. And he thought about it and chose to put my comfort before you. So be mad at me if you have to, but stop with the tantrum." This was the start of one of the worst days of her personal and professional life. Luckily for us, around the same time she was frantically and angrily texting us, the company commander, the facility manager, and another member of the chain of command pulled Womback into a private room and presented a copy of our dossier to her without saying much. According to one of the members present, Womback's color drained out of her face as she flipped through the pages and realized what was about to happen. By the time she reached the last page, she was ugly sobbing and making promises to repay us, and excuses as to why she did what she did. The commander silenced her and told her she had until my husband and I moved away to pay us in full. Failing could result in a loss in rank and Article 15 expulsion from the military, possibly dishonorably, and that even if she did repay us by the deadline, the report we made would be front and center in her personnel file, and would be the first thing seen by any of her future NCOs and commanders, and would always hinder her ability to be promoted. I think that last part broke her because, from what we've gathered, she tried to deflect onto me, by trying to convince the commander that I was a narcissist and financially abusing my husband. Because after leaving that meeting with Wambach, the commander made a phone call to my husband to investigate Wambach's allegations. My husband denied them and defended me, and that was the last we heard of it. At this point, we have only a few days left in New York and we're patiently waiting to be paid as we finish arranging our move. The day before we hit the road, one of the command team that was present at the meeting with Wambach asked to meet with hubby and I for coffee. We meet with them at a local coffee shop, and we make small talk. Really, nothing of any consequence was discussed until I was answering one of their questions, and the commander reached into their coat pocket and pulls out a blank envelope filled with cash and places it onto the table and slides it across to my hubby and I, like we're making a shady backroom drug deal. I trail off as I glance over at my husband, and he's glancing over at me. I stutter and ask, "Is that from Wambach?" The commander member replies, "Yes and no. It is a sum of money she owes you, but it's not from her. It's from me. I can't discuss any more of the details of what happened that day with you, but Wambach heavily implied that paying you back in such a short amount of time would cause a lot of hardships for her and her wife. Realistically, I doubt she'll be paying you tomorrow, if ever. I discussed this with my spouse, and we don't believe you two should be punished for doing the right thing and helping someone in need. We can afford to give this amount to you. I only ask that you report to the commander that Wambach's debt was paid in full." I asked for a moment to talk it over with my husband, and the command member gave us a few minutes alone. Ultimately, my husband and I decided to refuse the money the command member was presenting to us. We could have played it safe, but as much as we were doing this to get even and our money back, we were doing it to protect other lower enlisted from the disgusting behavior being displayed by Wambach too. Accepting the money would be protecting her and letting her off the hook. We didn't want that. Wambach is a predator, taking advantage of lower enlisted soldiers who may not know their rights in the army. We thanked them for their offer and left shortly after to continue our preparations. The following day, we started our long road trip to my husband's new installation. We had been on the road for a few hours when my husband got a notification on his phone. It was a Cash App transaction from Wambach. Surprisingly, she had paid us the full amount she owed. I can't tell you just how shocked I was when my husband told me that. I swear my jaw must have been opened and on the floor of my car for the last 5 miles before I came to my senses, and told my hubby to call the company commander and let him know that we had been paid. That really put us in a great mood for the rest of the road trip, to have dealt some much-deserved justice to the villain of our story, especially after enduring the dozen or so bullshit excuses Wambach had given us over the past year. The last few weeks for us have been busy with unpacking, organizing, and my husband checking into his new assigned installation. But we did make time to call a few of hubby's former co-workers and friends in New York. According to many of them, Wambach is miserable, and I love that for her. Wambach claims to miss hubby, but puts all the blame on me, because, like the narcissist I believe she is, she can't imagine that she didn't always have my hubby under her thumb. She can die mad. In addition to the consequences I already mentioned, she was ordered to stop any non-work-related communications with anyone E4 or below. She was also ordered to remove any lower enlisted member from her personal social media friends list. Wambach is incredibly mopey and low energy around the facility they work in every day, or irrationally pissed off. There is no in-between. Wambach had to use Glennon's entire paycheck to repay us, so Wambach is in hot water with her own wife. And I hope this whole ordeal opens Glennon's eyes to Wambach's true abusive and manipulative nature. That is my only regret about this whole thing. Glennon, while complicit, is just another victim of the real narcissist in this story. She was truly a sweet and friendly person who my hubby and I both miss. If you happen to ever come across this post, I hope you get far away from Womback and live a happy life, Glennon. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 258. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, I would appreciate it if you booped the like button. Thank you kindly. Alrighty, I don't think there's any other shout-outs to do today. No, there are not. Okay, but we do have a birthday shout-out, which is different from regular shout-outs. And today's birthday shout-out goes to a very handsome young man, probably second only to myself in levels of handsomeness. Well done, them. And that goes to Ven. And Ven is 23 years old today. Yes, on the 10th. They say they're approaching proper adult territory. I'm in my 40s and still hoping to get there one day. Now, I do speak to you occasionally, Ven, on the Discord, and I'll know if you are not having fun and treating yourself well today. So there will be a lecture if you're not doing that. So make sure you spoil yourself today, please. And before I go, I would like to sing happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Van. Happy birthday to you. Alrighty. And before we go, oh, why not? Let's have Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, has there ever been a reboot of something, a continuation of something that has just put you off? And specifically, I'm speaking about the Quantum Leap reboot here. Now, I can't judge what it's like as a show. I can't say if it's good or bad. I have no opinion on the quality of it as a show. But it was announced as a sequel, or at least they said it was going to be a sequel to Quantum Leap. And then Scott Bakula eventually put a statement out saying, yep, we spoke. I'm not going to be involved with it. Right? That's the gist of what happened. And he was very pragmatic. I wish them luck, yada, yada. But for me, if it was going to be a sequel, him being in it was essential. I mean, how do you make Cherry Garcia without the cherries? I don't actually like Cherry Garcia, but it was the first one that popped into my head. You can, right? Then it's just Garcia ice cream. Maybe that'd be nice. I don't know. But personally speaking, I'd rather they had just done a full-on reboot than that was the show. That I would have been down for. I'm generally in favor of doing reboots of things, especially if it's been a while between stories. But if you can't do a continuation without the original cast, it's not really a continuation, is it? You're trying to have your cake and eat it too with your cherryless ice cream. Anyway, let me know what you think. Is there anything you feel the same about? Please leave a comment below. And for the record, I'm not saying I'll never watch the new Quantum Leap show. I'm not even sure if I can watch it anywhere yet in the UK. But doing a reboot would have been more interesting to me than trying to do a sequel without the star. Okay, with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.